Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. It is time to start the webinar. Please put yourself on mute by pressing *6 because we are getting feedback. So please cooperate by doing that. So today's presentation is, the title is Recreational Beneficial Use Assessment, Central Valley Water Board's Monitoring in Freshwater Swimming Areas. So the presenter is Alicia Wenzel. Alicia Wenzel is an engineering geologist with the Surface Water Ambient Monitoring Program at the Central Valley Regional Water Quality Control Board. Alicia has worked as the Regional Swamp Coordinator for the past 10 years, helping to design and implement monitoring studies throughout the Central Valley region. Prior to joining the regional board, Alicia spent 5 years working for the U.S. Forest Service. Alicia has bachelor's and master's degrees in geology from the University of California, Berkeley. With this brief introduction, I will ask Alicia to start her presentation. And thank you, Alicia, for agreeing to do this webinar.
Thanks, Dewitt. Good afternoon, everyone. So as Dewitt mentioned, I'm going to be talking about one of our monitoring programs here at the Central Valley Water Board in freshwater swimming areas. Just a brief background on the program that I work in. So that's the Surface Water Ambient Monitoring Program, or SWAMP. SWAMP was created around the year 2000 and is tasked with assessing water quality in all of California's surface waters. This program conducts monitoring directly and through collaborative partnerships, all designed to support water resource management in California. The program has both statewide and regional elements to their monitoring. And of course, I'm going to be focusing on the regional monitoring in the Central Valley Water Board. You can see here the Central Valley region comprises about 40% of the state, includes 3 major watersheds, the Sacramento and San Joaquin Rivers, both that drain through the Delta, and then the Tulare Lake Basin down in the south. The region has diverse water quality issues, including, of course, swimming. So about 10 years ago, our program decided to try to assess recreational beneficial uses in our waters. So we have a large number of rivers, streams, and lakes that are all very popular for swimming, and so we wanted to target some of those areas. Our monitoring program, we set it up so we're monitoring primarily during the summer months when people are out swimming. And so over those 10 years, our design has definitely evolved and expanded. And I'll give you a little bit of background on that. Kind of why we decided to focus on this effort. One is that there is no comprehensive program for freshwater beaches in California, so this is a data gap. Also, the analyses are relatively low cost, and we actually set up in-house laboratories to do the analysis. We have 3 offices in the Central Valley region. So here in the Sacramento area where I'm located, and then also in Redding and Fresno. So each of those offices can do the analyses. There's obviously a lot of public interest in recreation and whether it's safe for people to be out there. And it's also a lot of opportunity for coordination and outreach to local watershed groups and citizens. Some of the challenges in taking this on, one of course is the large number of water bodies out there. And for the bacteria that we analyze, have relatively short holding time. So the holding time is the period between when we collect the sample and when it has to be in the laboratory for analysis. In addition, bacteria levels are very dynamic, so they change. So if you collect a sample and then another sample 10 minutes apart, you can see quite a bit of variability. So ideally, we require multiple sampling events to really evaluate the conditions at a water body. And it's also affected by seasonal changes and rainfall events. There is no dedicated program, as I mentioned, for freshwater beaches. There's no resources allocated for that. And there's no guidance for posting, which is quite different from the coastal beaches that a lot of people are familiar with, where you regularly see updates on that monitoring. So how do we go about assessing recreational uses? So really what we're focusing on, we are a water quality program, so we want to know if there's anything in the water that would cause people in contact with it to get sick. So usually that means pathogens. It's not practical to monitor for individual pathogens just because of the large number of them and the cost, although methods continue to improve. So what most water quality programs do is they focus on fecal indicator bacteria. So these are bacteria that indicate the presence of fecal pollution, and so we can make some assumptions about risk of illness. So the indicator that we use is called E. coli. A lot of people have probably heard about E. coli in the news, and typically that's referring to very specific pathogenic strains of E. coli. Most E. coli is harmless in the environment.
Alicia, I'm sorry to interrupt you. We're getting a message that says that we're not seeing your slides.
Okay. Can you see the slides? Or
I can see them.
We are seeing it here.
Yeah, I'm seeing it.
Okay. Is anybody else not seeing the slides? Okay, I'm sorry to interrupt.
I'm sorry about that. Hopefully, I know this is being recorded, so and the presentation will also be available so people can watch later or see the results. So as I was saying, most strains of E. coli are harmless. I just want to emphasize that. It's found in all pet, wildlife, and human waste. So that is a bit of a challenge because when we do find elevated E. coli levels, we don't know what the source of that E. coli is. So anyone who's maybe been tracking the State Water Board's development of proposed statewide bacteria objectives, this might look familiar, but I just wanted to quickly touch on how we evaluate our results. So what we're using is US EPA's recommended 2012 recreational water quality criteria. And these are the basis for those proposed statewide bacteria objectives. EPA has provided some options in terms of indicators and illness rates. What California is proposing to use E. coli as its indicator for freshwater areas and use the more protective illness rate of 32 swimmers per 1,000. And what you see circled in red is the two criteria that we go with. So it's a geometric mean of 100. So that's a calculation that's done on a rolling 6-week basis. And then a statistical threshold value of 320, which shouldn't be exceeded in more than 10% of samples in a calendar month. So I don't want to go into a lot of depth on that, but I just want to kind of mention those as I'm talking about our data. So as I mentioned, our program has been around for about 10 years now. It started initially in 2007 and 2008 with Labor Day surveys. So we just wanted to kind of get out to some of these water bodies and see what the conditions were. So we went out before, during, and after Labor Day weekend. We did a lot of outreach to watershed groups, so over 20 watershed groups to find out where people are swimming, and then in some cases we actually provided training and material so those watershed groups could help us with the sampling. So over those 2 years we sampled 56 stations that you can see here, and that kind of gave us a first snapshot of what the conditions were in our region. Going forward, like I mentioned, that design did evolve. So for the next couple of years, we kind of went back and focused on some of the watersheds where we did see some high E. coli levels, and even did some targeted pathogen analyses, although we found that with the sample size that we had, we weren't able to make a lot of conclusions with that. So starting in 2011, we kind of expanded the program out again to try to cover more of the region. We also wanted to conduct more sampling, so sampling throughout the summer season. We were trying to go to a lot of sites, so in a given summer, we were usually going to over 70 sites monthly or twice a month. So we continued that design through 2014. And during that period is also when the new EPA criteria came out and kind of renewed focus on that geometric mean assessment. So one of the things we realized is that we were going to a lot of sites, but we didn't necessarily have a lot of data points at each of those sites, and we couldn't evaluate them using the geometric mean. So starting in 2015, we kind of started targeting specific watersheds so that we could go out and sample weekly and get a better idea of conditions. Just to kind of see how that looks, this is kind of a quick map that just shows all of the sites that we sampled between 2007 and 2016. So it's about 175 sites. And what the colors here show kind of how many times we sampled each of those sites. You can see a lot of them were doing, fewer than 10 samples.
Thank you. Thank you.
Excuse you. But some of the areas where we were going back to more frequently. And so we kind of looked at a lot of this data and wanted to go back to some of the watersheds to do those more focus assessments so we can look at the geometric mean and see if it really was meeting the criteria. One of the areas that we've been focusing on, and you may have heard about in the news, is the Lower American River. So this river, the section that we're focused on is below kind of Folsom Lake and Lake Natoma. You can see on the right side of this map. And then the river actually flows down through downtown Sacramento and joins the Sacramento River there. What you see here are the sites that we have monitored over the years. Initially, back in 2007, we only had 2 sites on this river. Discovery Park near the confluence with the river is a very popular recreation area, and then the Lower Sunrise Recreation area higher up on the river. And we started to notice elevated E. coli at Discovery Park, and so we continue to return to this river at additional sites to kind of better understand what conditions are. This is a quick summary of that data. So what you can see here is a bar graph listing all of those sites. So again, you have Nimbus on the right side and the confluence with the Sacramento on the left. And in blue are all the number of assessments that are below our EPA criteria. And in orange are the assessments that are above that criteria. And you can see clearly that as we get towards the confluence, the sites have a lot more samples above the criteria. So then the pie charts on the bottom of the screen kind of summarize that, where in the lower 2 miles of the river between Camp Pollock and the confluence of the river, almost 50% of the assessments have been above the criteria, where when you get above that, only 4% of the samples were above the criteria. And this kind of helps us focus in on where we want to put our resources and try to figure out the problem. So one of the reasons this is a big concern, so as I mentioned, Discovery Park and then Tiscornia Beach right at the confluence of the river is very popular for recreation, has thousands of swimmers out during the summer. We also have fishermen and boaters. And so this is clearly an area that we want to protect. Trying to identify sources of the fecal contamination and the elevated E. coli. Like I mentioned, E. coli is present in the waste of pretty much all warm-blooded animals. So that means that the sources that we're looking at include wildlife, like the birds we see at a lot of sites, like the geese in this picture, domestic animals, people's pets, sanitary sewer overflows, stormwater inputs from the surrounding urban areas, as well as the people. So people both out recreating, and the American River Parkway that runs along the river has also had a problem with illegal encampments, which are all sources, potential sources of the E. coli. So we are actively working with some of the local agencies and stakeholders to design and fund a study to try to identify those sources and investigate the elevated E. coli. The initial design of the study would use molecular methods to identify the sources, so enable us to identify whether the contamination is coming from birds or dogs or humans, and that would kind of help focus those efforts. We're also investigating some of the newer methods available to monitor for specific pathogens to help us understand the health risk out there. While that's going on, kind of the first phase of that study, in essence, we are out monitoring weekly and have been since January. So we have 9 sites on the American River in that section, and we also have 2 sites near the mouth of Steelhead Creek, which is a creek that comes into Discovery Park. It actually flows into the Sacramento River, but it's been the focus of a lot of the complaints about trash and illegal camping, so we wanted to collect some data there. And our goals for this effort are to keep the public informed about current conditions, and also to continue to inform the design of a source identification study. We've recognized that we need to do a better job of getting our data out there and making it available for people. So we do have a new protocol for Central Valley Water Board staff to ensure that we notify local environmental health directors immediately of elevated results and hopefully improve our coordination with them. And then we also want to ensure that the public is notified in a timely manner. So we've been coordinating with Sacramento County Regional Parks, and they've actually developed a new website on their American River Parkway website that includes information on E. coli and recommendations for healthy swimming habits, and also includes a link to an online interactive map where people can access our draft E. coli results. So this is just a screenshot, but you can see our sites along the American River. As well as just recently we've added some results from the Sacramento River monitoring that I'll be talking about shortly. And what you can see from the legend, so sites that show up in green are currently meeting all of the US EPA criteria. Sites in yellow are above that geometric mean of 100. And sites in red, the most recent result is above the statistical threshold value of 320. So we do have a lot of sites, but the map, like I said, is interactive. You can zoom in and click on a site. So here I've selected the American River at North 10th Street. So if you click on a site, this pop-up window will appear. You can see a photograph of the site, get some more information, and it'll tell you what the latest result is. If this was live, you could scroll down and it will also show you the last 4 results and include a link to a spreadsheet with all of our results from 2018. I do want to emphasize that these results are draft, so they have not undergone thorough review, but we want to make sure to get the information out there. So that's kind of a brief summary of what we're doing in the lower American River this year. I also wanted to mention a couple of other watersheds that we're monitoring this year. So those are the Sacramento River and the San Joaquin River. So the Sacramento River is actually a new watershed for this program. We hadn't monitored there before, but we were getting some questions about what conditions were, especially since it's just downstream of the American River. So we are out monitoring 9 stations weekly, in addition to 2 sites just near the mouth of the lower American River to give us an idea of how that varies. And what's kind of different about this monitoring run is that we're actually collecting the samples by boat. So you can see we're kind of covering an area from about where Highway 80 crosses the Sacramento River down to Freeport. And like I mentioned earlier, all of these results are also now available in our online map so people can see how they're doing. And then down in our Fresno office, swamp staff have also been out monitoring sites along the San Joaquin River. This river has been monitored quite a bit, so initially in 2008 and again from 2010 through 2014. So they're sampling 7 stations. So far this year, none of those samples have been above the EPA criteria, but we're continuing to be out there. I also wanted to touch briefly on how to find out more information. So you can definitely visit our website. Our website also includes a link to the online map, but it also has reports and fact sheets and more information about our previous studies. In addition, all of our data, once it does undergo review and verification, is made available through the California Environmental Data Exchange Network, or CEDN. So you can download the data there. It is not the most user-friendly format for some people, and so we are also actively working on getting the data included in the California Water Quality Monitoring Council's Safe to Swim portal. So currently that portal only provides coastal beach data, but there are efforts underway to add all data from CEDN. And we do have an inland beaches work group that I participate on that's working on that, as well as developing some standard operating procedures for collecting samples and other information. So if you're interested in that, I encourage you to go visit that website, and there's information on how to contact us and if you can get involved if you want. And with that, I'll thank you and ask if there's any questions. I've also, again, included the link to our website and my contact information.
Thank you, Alicia. People can go ahead and ask questions if you have any.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead, ask.
Alicia, in a slide that you are summarizing the Lower American River data in a chart that had some...
This one?
Yes, this one. Is that the illness rate?
I'm sorry, what was that?
Is that the illness rate, or is it the E. coli count? What are those numbers?
It's the number of assessments that are above those EPA criteria. So whenever, sorry, a little background. So we prioritize using the geometric mean criteria so that when we have 5 samples within a 6-week period, we'll use that geometric mean. So during sampling periods where we have sufficient data, that's the criteria we use. When we don't have that much data, then we're using the statistical threshold value of 320 on a monthly basis. That's why it's a little vague saying assessments. I was trying to combine them both into one assessment.
Okay, so when I'm looking at that number 45, that tallest bar, that shows that 45%, 45 times that exceeded the 100 geometric mean objective. Is that right?
Yeah, it exceeded the geometric mean or the statistical threshold value.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
I have a couple of questions in the chat. What is the interest in the San Joaquin River if there hasn't been any hits on the sample sites?
Yeah, sorry, I think I blew that. So one of the things we're trying to do, so our earlier monitoring, in the earlier years of the program, we were kind of going out, maybe a couple times a summer or maybe monthly, and that didn't enable us to calculate the geometric means. And so one of the things we're trying to do now is return to some of those watersheds and do more thorough sampling, so the weekly sampling, and do another assessment. In addition, conditions change a lot, so it's also a good idea to go back out and just kind of reassess the watershed.
Okay. I have another one. For the recreational sites sampled, are these only from your staff or program who are sampling, or are you partnering with local volunteers, nonprofits who are also sampling in some of these locations? It would seem that those extra data would be beneficial.
Yeah, so most of this data is from our staff. In the past, we have partnered with some watershed groups where we provided training and supplies. The watershed groups would collect the samples, and then we did the analysis and data management. Just because of some staff changes here, we haven't been doing that. We aren't doing that currently, although we are interested in pursuing that again. I have been in contact with some groups that are doing their own monitoring and trying to encourage them that really we need to get that data into CEDN so that it can be used for our assessments, both for our regional assessments, but also for a lot of other water board programs. Hopefully that sort of answers the question.
In line with this, are there some other regional boards doing similar survey, or is it only Region 5?
I know some other regions are out monitoring for indicator bacteria. I don't know of any of them that have programs where they're actively trying to go out and target swimming areas. The Lahontan Regional Board, Region 6 up by Tahoe, does also have an in-house laboratory and do some analyses, and their program is a little different.
You have a question? Hold on, let's get you a mic.
I have a question on the high number of hits near Discovery Park. Is that likely attributable to the homeless encampments over there?
We don't really know what the sources are, so that's really why we want to do that study. There's a lot of potential sources in that area, so we are actively exploring that option. That's why we want to really do the molecular source tracking, so we can figure out, is it human sources or is it other animals that's the dominant source there.
Do I have a comment? Yeah, many of the illegal campers also have loose dogs, at which they also do not clean up the fecal matter from. So
yes.
The illegal campers are both the human and the domestic animals impact, and people have been observed dumping and sweeping fecal matter right into the river and dumping it from boats into the river there.
Yeah, that's a great observation. So that's both, from the illegal campers, but also from just people visiting the parkway, that we think, definitely dogs, humans, and birds are potential sources that we want to explore. But we just don't have any data at this point to really say what the dominant source is.
Alicia, one more question on Sacramento River sampling that you said that's a new watershed. Mm-hmm. Does the sampling have already started? Yes,
it has. I think we actually have a crew out there as we speak, and I think this will be the 5th week of sampling. It might be the 6th, but I think we lost one set of results due to a lab problem.
And what method is used? Is it like EPA 1600 method? And are we monitoring E. coli, anything else?
So we collect E. coli, and we use IDEX Call Alert 18, which I can't remember. There is a standard method associated with it that I can't remember off the top of my head. So with that, we get both total coliform and E. coli. So that's really the only indicators. We do collect a lot of field observations as well as field measurements, temperature, dissolved oxygen, pH, turbidity when we're out in the field.
Thank you.
I have a couple more from the chat. Have you considered testing for enterococcus? Also, do you think there is value in this?
That's something we've kind of been exploring. We have not sampled for entero. So right now the way, and we'll see, I should mention, so State Water Board is holding a meeting, I believe, August 7th to consider adopting the statewide bacteria objectives. So currently, as they're proposed, E. coli is the sole indicator for freshwater. So that's kind of been our focus. I know a lot of coastal areas they do use enterococcus.
Okay. For the lower American River, when will results of investigating sources of E. coli be available?
I can't make any guarantees. So right now, as I said, we're working on that study plan with some of the local agencies. We were hoping to get it going this summer. Things always take a little bit longer to get into place. Hopefully we'll start monitoring this year, but it's probably going to be at least a year before we can draw real conclusions. If there are conclusions we can make, kind of reviewing the data as it comes in, we'll definitely be sharing that with the public and others and trying to react to it. But we just kind of have to wait and see what we discover.
Okay. Are results from testing in other areas available?
So All of our previous monitoring data does, like I said, does go into CDIN. On our website, we also have a lot of data summaries and fact sheets for the different watersheds that we've monitored. And if someone's interested in a specific watershed, feel free to contact me. Maybe I should go back to that last slide again. You can also use your favorite search engine and just search for Central Valley Swamp, and I think our website is one of the first to come up, since you have trouble typing in that long URL.
Okay, last question. Is E. coli the only parameter used for assessing safe to swim?
It's the only parameter we're using from a water quality perspective. So there are other fecal indicator bacteria that are in use, but as I mentioned, California, the State Water Board has proposed solely using E. coli for freshwater assessments.
Okay, any more questions from the phone? Okay. Thank you, Alicia, for doing this. I think this will finish today's webinar. Thank you all for participating.
Thank you, Alicia.
Thank you, everyone.